want to welcome you to one of the most remarkable journeys you will ever take. Come and join me as we walk the corridors of the mythological dragons and beasts of St. John's Revelation. During the 3rd century after the crucifixion of Christ, the powerful bishops and Arians came into debate on the floor of Constantinople under the guardianship of Constantine. Constantine was a Christian king, and he wanted a nation that was not divided. Thus, at the end of the debate, the Arians lost, and their work was relegated to the Dark Ages. The bishops, however, knowing that humanity was illiterate, that they thought the world was the center of the universe, felt that the secret teachings of Christianity could not be given. To quote one of the early bishops, it would be like giving a weapon into the hands of a child. Among these secret teachings was the mysteries of St. John's Revelation. A new age has dawned now, and for the first time in the history of the manuscript, every single symbol will be broken, and every mystery will be revealed to you. I am your hostess, Elizabeth MacDonald Burrows. Welcome to another episode and another leg up the ladder of Odyssey of the Apocalypse. My producer informed me that I omitted chapter 7 in my anticipation, excitement, of course, to getting to the bottomless pit. Needless to say that when we left off last week, we certainly knew that one woe was past and we had 2 more to come, and we weren't sure about that. We will be going back to chapter 9 and to that particular verse, which was ended, of course, on chapter 9, verse 12. But we will, in the interim, pick up chapter 7. So we will begin with the angel of the 4 winds, and then we will go on to a story. That story I've been promising you for 2 or 3 weeks about Saint John, or about John the Beloved. And then we will go on with chapter 9 and finish it up today and roll on into the bottomless pit like true heroes and allow the inner Christ to ride the horses of the apocalypse into that final and great and wondrous battle. Fortunately, he is always victor, so we needn't worry about succumbing to the dragon and not being successful in our ascent up the ladder of the transformational change or the resurrection of the dead. If you remember, I had read this scripture toward the end of an episode 2 weeks ago of the angel of the 4 winds, and it was from Corinthians 1, 15 and 42, 44. We'll begin there without the explanation that we offered at the end of it, of that particular episode. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown in a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body, and there is a spiritual body. And rather to sum that up with not quite the same explanation as we gave before, John is simply saying if we were to substitute the word soul for it, the soul is sown in corruption, as it is, of course, enticed into the world of matter. And then it is raised in corruption, because once the spirit descends to live in the flesh and raise the soul in preparation to become the holy bride, it is then becomes filled with incorruption. The soul is sown in dishonor, but it is raised in glory. The soul is sown in weakness during its journey through the sojourn of matter, but it is raised in power. And the soul is sown in a natural body, but it is raised a spiritual body. Excuse me. There is a natural body, and there is a spiritual body. So we have, as we have talked about before, two selves, that which is eternal and immortal, that part of us which is corporeal and temporal. So we will begin with verse 1. And after these things, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor the sea, nor on any tree. Remember, we have 3 aspects that we are purifying: the body and the soul and the spirit. And when it talks about the 4 angels standing upon the 4 points of the universe, it is speaking of the actual 4 elements, which are, of course, earth, fire, water, and air, which brings about all life that exists throughout the universe of the stars. And they're holding the 4 winds. That means, of course, that they have reign or hold or possess the 4 elements of earth. And that they are saying that the wind is not going to be allowed to blow the mysteries of heaven and earth for a whisper while the soul is in the dark night of the womb, ceases in that stillness and quietness of its dark night. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. So this indicates the 4 angels, even though we have come, they're not supposed to blow on the earth or the sea, nor the tree, which would be the tree of life, which is within all mankind. But in reality, it is saying that it is given to them to hurt the earth and the sea, which would be the mind and the body. For the body is of earth and the mind is of the sea. And to hurt means to purify. It doesn't mean that hurt or pain as we might think of it when someone says something that is bad or something against us. This is that type of purgation that goes on in purging out the mind and the body. And he is saying, hurt not the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servant of God in the foreheads. And do not hurt that which is in the soul, which is immortal, since the Christ is indwelling, and it is that part of the soul which can not be destroyed. It is saying, don't hurt the good in the soul. Take only away and destroy only that which is impure. It was then that I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144 and 4,000 of all the tribes of Israel. And before we began, we have already explained the 144,000, but for those who have just joined us, we will repeat it again, and it's somewhat important because as we go through the rule, it says the tribe of Judah is sealed 12,000, and the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000, and the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. So we're going to be looking at the number 12,000 in relationship to the 12 tribes of Israel. It is so complex and so intricate that I only hope that by diagramming this on the board and explaining it, that there is a semblance of its meaning that I'm able to get across. The world doesn't understand mastership. They don't understand that Moses not only illumined on Sinai, but that he achieved the resurrection of the dead, to have mastered his earthly life, and to go on into eternal immortality. And this has been a part and crux of the mysteries throughout the centuries, and long before Moses existed on earth. So when we start to go into the mysteries of spiritual mastership, gaining victory over earth, it seems as though for a moment we may be deviating from the resurrection of the dead. But in reality, they are the same. And if we can keep that in mind, perhaps this will not seem so foreign to us. We have to remember that Moses, having been drawn by God to lead the children of Israel, was supposed to take them to the promised land. This land, of course, had been promised to the chosen people. And it is, of course, certainly for this reason that the Jewish people still feel that they are the chosen people of God. And we must look that in that dispensation, most definitely, they were the chosen of God. During the dispensation of Moses and the period that was to follow thereafter. So it was given to Moses to train the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel into the mysteries. The mysteries being how to unite the two selves and bring them back to the one God. 12,000 does not mean that there were just 12,000 people that was involved in each tribe. That would be rather probably facetious. But it does mean that each one of the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel would be initiated into how to unite the two selves in the return of the one God. In turn, the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel would then also pass that on to those that were within their tribes, thus bringing everything into one accord, almost like the planets rotating around the sun, or the 12 signs of the zodiac. It would bring them into harmony. Thus the 12 tribes in the motion, or coming out from Moses, who would be, was the leader and was as the sun, would envelop or encompass ultimately the whole of earth and bring forth the great truths and the great light upon earth itself. Thus they were to serve as a vanguard. It was certainly true that Moses established the first nation ever based upon natural and cosmic law. It also was true that his teachings on the variety of laws that stem from the one single law of God was to lay a foundation which would affect us in such a manner that courts would ultimately be established. When Moses selected the 72 elders, he laid the foundation for what would be known as the Supreme Courts. We may not equate our Supreme Courts with that of the 72 elders of Moses, but it was he and his laws and these that laid a pattern for a court, which later was to become the Sanhedrin. And it is true that as time went on, the teachings did span out like a radiant sun and went on, and now over 2,000 years later, we are still talking about this great transformation that Moses was attempting to create among his people, to create that vanguard, the ones who would go before. I want to draw this in such a manner as to say that if you remember, we do better with 144,000 if we draw it this way, that the soul is immersed by the four elements into the world of matter, because that's what our bodies are comprised of. And at the same time, that great indwelling Christ, that great light of God which is called his Son, which has been given to each of us, is also incarnate into the world of matter. That has wandered in us or walked in us throughout our journey of the millions of years of planetary progression and evolution. This was why we have a conscience. It is him inside of us that would kind of chastise us when we would do something wrong. Unfortunately, we were so bound in darkness that we tried, if possible, to put the conscience behind us so that we could follow self-will, the wily old dragon, old Satan, and follow self-will into the thing, to be able to do the things that we wanted to. So we would have to unite the body and the soul and the spirit into one in order to step out with the illumined mind, or be, as one would say, the saved or one of the enlightened. Now, again, I stress, everyone's going to reach this stage, so it's the consciousness of our future world. So no one need ever be proud of having achieved it if they already did. Their task is then to continue and to help all others to reach it. But the 12,000 means really virtually the same thing. We have the two selves, and they must return to one, and they will return to one through the union of the body and the soul and the spirit. So the 12 tribes of Israel were almost like the 12 signs of the zodiac, in a way. And that was to say that if we were to take them and we were to put Moses in the center, and then we were to draw a circle, and we were to dissect the circle, and of course, I'm still no artist, and we would then divide this as the zodiac is divided. And again, I stress, I do not know astrology, only enough to know of creation itself, to know that every planet in this vast universe of the stars has an effect on us. I know that we are made of stardust, and that our soul is made of fire and light. So, if we were to take the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, put them around in this manner, we can see how these great truths would fan out from Moses himself to encompass everything, just as the sun encompasses everything. We can ask ourselves if Moses laid this plan in that manner, or is it that God flows through everything and these things take place sometimes even unknowing to the person that reflects them? Because Moses certainly became such a reflection of God as his soul was purified and as more and more of the Spirit of God could flow through him. So it is this way, like the sun, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And when he put these in the Hebrew breastplate, each one stood not only for a tribe of Israel, but it stood that when they were unified, they would form a vast armament, a breastplate of righteousness that would be powerful to overcome everything that was dark and unknowing, like hatred and anger and jealousy. So the Hebrew breastplate, called an esin, was placed upon the 12 tribes of Israel, represented by a variety of stones. And the fascinating thing about these stones is that many of them are used in the foundation of the new city of Jerusalem, as we get into the final chapters of Odyssey of the Apocalypse, or of the Apocalypse. But nevertheless, these stones in the Hebrew breastplate also have symbolic meaning, meaning that there was symbolism attached to such things as stones and water and stars and things like this. We find that each one of these stones, which represented a single tribe of the 12 tribes, reflected an aspect of purification which was necessary to reach mastership or conquering the earthly nature, so that there would be no further embodiment on earth. Well, I hope that explained it to you some. The plan was so perfect and so perfectly executed that we are prone to think that it is the flow of God flowing through the soul of Moses who laid such a remarkable foundation. We are not saying either that Moses might not have been somewhat enlightened, because actually the pharaohs of Egypt represented an emissary between God and humankind. And Moses was raised certainly in the palace of the Pharaoh through all of his young years. So I'm certain he had the ability to read and write, a few things that people in his day did not have. So he had every opportunity to be able to take the leadership role that it had been prophesied. And I think most of you may know that the prophecies pertaining to the coming of Moses are not really so dissimilar to the prophecies pertaining to the coming of Jesus. Well, back to this anyway. By this time we go through verse 5. He has sealed or has indicated that the mysteries are taught to the tribe of Judah and Reuben and Gad, and then to the tribe of Asher and Nephthalim and Manasseh, then to Simon and Levi, Issachar, and Zebulun and Joseph and Benjamin, totaling then the 144,000, or symbolic of the 144,000, the perfection, when all mankind collectively came into oneness with God. And we once again journeyed into the world of peace and wonder. And after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude. And this tells us that this pattern is designed for the whole of earth. Because it said, after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palms in their hands, which is that ultimate and final vision that comes when we as a human race have overcome the sensations and our carnal appetites and so on, and now have joined together worldwide and have come to peace as we stand, all of our souls purified, so that we can move on into the higher angelic realms. And so, and of course, palms, the palm branches represented victory. They used the same thing when Jesus came down from the Garden of Gethsemane to preach at the temple on the day that he was taken prisoner to be executed, as he came on the burro. And it had to be this way because he represented the higher self, the divine nature, the Christ in everybody, riding its beastly nature to the crucifixion. And of course that meant victory of that aspect. The God incarnate into the flesh would have victory over all things. So as Jesus rode the burro, representing a beast of burden, down to into the circumstances that would bring about his crucifixion, he was honored by the people waving palm branches, meaning victory. So this is what is meant here, because it said that they have palms in their hands, representing, of course, victory. And cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, who sits upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. And all the angels stood about the throne and about the elders and the four beasts, and fell before them, before the throne on their faces, and worshipped God. So someday, sometime, it is written that when we become a world family who can live together and work together, we not only will be one in God, but we will be able to play together and live together in a kingdom which is of heaven. Saying Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever. Amen. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence come they? And I said to him, Sir, thou knowest. And we have talked about this in another episode also. White is significant of the soul which has been purified and wears the bridal garments of the Christ. And that the brides of our modern time wear white, and in the old days the grooms wore, of course, the dark or black was traditional, representing the marriage was of earth and not of heaven. And so it said, arrayed in white robes, these people who had come, these thousands upon thousands, whose soul now had become the bride of the indwelling Christ. And I said, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, these are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Through that sacrifice of the corporeal nature, through the great Armageddon battle, at last the soul standing purified, having sacrificed this, it was said to be made white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. And they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into the living fountains of water, and God shall wipe away the tears from their eyes. So we know then that when this time comes, when the soul stands resplendent in the wedding garments of the bride, and stands with the Christ in the unitive state which makes them one in God, that there won't be any more hunger or thirst or tears or sorrow. And we're going to hear those same words again before too long when we go into the final chapters of the Apocalypse. I kind of like the way John brought it to Hawaii, that part of it, and I'll read it. It's so beautiful and melodious and almost like music playing. And I said to him, Sir, you know. Then he replied, saying, These are those who have gone through the dark night of the soul, and given birth to the indwelling Christ. They have purified their souls and made them white through the sacrifice of the personal life. And now they have come before the throne of God, and will serve him day and night in his temple, which has been raised within him. And he that sits upon the throne shall dwell among them forever. And they shall never know hunger or thirst again, nor feel the sun or heat of the corporeal world. For the indwelling Christ, who has been resurrected in them, shall care for them, and lead them to the living waters of truth and wisdom forever. And God shall wipe away the tears from their eyes. Well, that finished that 7th chapter that we missed before. And so before we go on to chapter 9, because of the lack of continuity of skipping over here, let's have a little story. There is another one in here about John, and that I like very much. Remember what I said about the Apocryphal New Testament, is that we do take it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but in the sense that it's not purified. But we find many incidents in the life of Jesus and of John in here. And the thing that tells us that there is the probability that they are authentic is there's always a deep and spiritual meaning to many of the stories. And I have chosen another one. If you remember, we had one not too long ago about the partridge. So we're going to have another one now. It was said that the most blessed evangelist John, when he was gently stroking a partridge with his hand, suddenly saw one in the habit of a hunter coming to him. He wondered what a man of such repute and fame, why a man of such repute and fame should demean himself to such a small and humble amusements. So the hunter, seeing John there and petting a partridge, thought, here is this great man, and he has lowered himself to the commonality of petting a bird. That seems a ridiculous way to spend one's life. So he asked him, he said, Are thou John, whose eminent and widespread fame has enticed me also with great desire to know you? So here we have a hunter coming to see John who's wanted to meet him. And now we see a humble man sitting there petting a partridge. I wonder what it would be like if such a thing happened to us in modern time. I'm sure we'd be like the hunter, thinking that was such a demeaning position for someone of such prominence. He said, "Why are you taken up with such mean amusements?" And John said to him, ask him, "What is it that you carry in your hands?" And the hunter replied, "A bow." And so John asked him, he said, "Why don't you bear it stretched all the time? Would it not be easier if you had the bow all stretched, that all you had to do was to put your arrow in order to shoot? So why was the bow not stretched?" And the hunter said, I must not, lest the constant bending and strength of its vigor be wrung, and that it would grow soft and perish. And when there is a need that the arrows be shot with much strength at some beast, the strength will be lost by the excess of continual tension. A forcible blow cannot be dealt. And just so, said John, let not this little brief relaxation of my mind offend you, young man. For unless it does sometimes ease and relax by some remission of the force of tension, it will grow slack through unbroken rigor and will not be able to obey the power of the Spirit. So he's saying, if we're on the spiritual path and we get so hung up that we cannot take time to play occasionally, or to care, or to love, or to do something simple in life, we become like the bow which is been stretched to its maximum point, and when this happens we become rigid and fixed, and the Spirit can no longer operate through us. So John, that's one of the other stories about the partridge, and I thought perhaps you'd like to hear that before we go on to chapter 9. Well, I think that we had gotten to that point of where one woe was past, and we survived it. So now we know that there are two more woes, and we think, things must be extraordinarily difficult. I don't know whether I want to go through this or not. We all have a choice to enter the marvelous and remarkable chrysalis stage of the dark night, to allow ourselves to be transformed in a period of 20 or 25 years, and maybe even longer, to be purified and to be changed and to rise to our greatness and to know the mysteries of the universe. Or we can hold ourselves, run away from this and say, I don't have to go through this, or I don't want to go through it, or I don't want to deal with it. And we can remain bound to mowing lawns and fixing cars and going to jobs that we don't like, and never ever discovering the true genius that is in us. So I think when you equate the over 10 million years of human life, and I'm talking about the first very rough humans, probably part animal, part human almost, which began to advent over 10.5 million years ago. All those millions of years we've done these routine things. Yes, we've also done other things. We discovered fire. We learned how to cook our food. And from time to time, we've had these great explorations. But for the most part, it has been routine. And that routine of getting up in the morning and going to bed at night has gone on for centuries. What is 20 or 25 years? Is that not like a breath of wind that came one day and was gone the next? It's like seconds in time, if even that long. And when the throes of the dark night has passed away, you will applaud every moment of darkness you experienced, because it changed you. It helped you to see differently. And above all, we learn to love. So, put on your breastplate and armament, and let's go into this battle and fight it out and enter into this second woe with great rejoicing. One woe is past. We're on chapter 9, and we're on verse 12. One woe is past, and behold, there are two more to come. And we have just gotten through the breastplates and scorpions and all of that, and now the sixth angel sounded. And I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God. And of course, that's from those four beasts that stand around the throne of God, and also the four elements that bind man to the world of matter and separate him from God. And that golden altar has always meant that wisdom of altar, the gold of spirit. And saying to the sixth angel, which had a trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound by the great river Euphrates. I'm going to, in some of the research, I found some remarkable symbolism of the river of Euphrates. It said, although the symbolism of Euphrates has been clarified in chapter introductions here, it is useful to further explain its usage in this scripture. According to the ancient writings, the first purification is said to be of earth. To pass this test, the body and its senses must be subdued in all of its part and become a perfect instrument of enlightened will. The second mystery is that of water, in which the seeker of God finds himself in the sea or the subconscious, which separates the two worlds, human and divine. Remember, we drew this, that as long as we have the portals of the subconscious mind that rest between the world of the conscious mind and the superconscious, or between God and man, we have a separation. We do not have unity. So the second mystery is then of water, in which we find ourselves into the sea or the subconscious. And he who reaches the immortal world must cross this abyss by the process of purgation. We have found the sea, of course, certainly referenced here in St. John's Revelation, and we know also that even beyond it, into the deep levels of the subconscious mind, we shall find that bottomless pit. And the third mystery is that of fire, in which the seeker of immortality must conquer ambition and pride and the flaming tyranny of emotional excess. The fourth mystery is air, wherein the mind develops wisdom to rise as vapor and end the corruptible reign of the senses. This never-ending flood of revelation, which encompasses the soul at the time the spirit descends to live in the flesh, is likened unto a great river. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of man. And this part always brings me back to memory of that time in Hawaii, because it would be statements like this that would be so impossible for me to interpret. And I remember, like, times in time and halftime, I said to John, "You have done it to me again," meaning I really couldn't make heads or tails out of it. And John would always have me sit down and take a piece of paper and then put one thing at a time, like 1 hour, 1 day, and 1 month. And as I would do this, then I would reach that comprehension of what each one of these meant. And I'm certain I didn't reach that comprehension by my own aptitude for this. So this kind of takes us back to the beginning of the introduction, in which we can talk about this, because it said, and they have prepared for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year to slay the third part of man. Hour, of course, signifies the hour of worship, when the soul and the indwelling Christ seek oneness. So in that hour that we seek to return to the one represents an hour. Moving on from hour today, Day signifies the seventh day, or the day of final progression, when we reach for God, the 1 hour, that one special hour, which takes place on worship day, on Sunday, the Sabbath, that hour between 11 and 12, when we worship. On that hour, we reach for God. On the seventh day of, which represents that seventh epoch of creation, the seventh day, which is a holy day in which we worship. And so it signifies the seventh cycle of progression in which the soul transforms from human to divine through the resurrection of the indwelling Christ. As the remainder of the week consists of 6 days, and 6 times 24 equals, guess what, 144, the number of perfection. So we look at 144 in the future, not as the saved, but as the number of perfection. This multiplied by the 4 cardinal points, because we have 6 days of the week, and we have 6 times 24, the hours of the day. And so now we reach the number of perfection. Now we know that what binds us to earth are the 4 elements. So it's multiplied by the 4 cardinal points of the universe, described here as 4 weeks, representing, of course, the 4 elements, fire, water, earth, and air, thereby designating completely a philosophical rebirth, or the resurrection of the dead. 1 year, or which is, of course, 1 year. That, again, the resurrection that takes us, or transformation that takes us into oneness. And this is through, of course, the destruction of the aspects, the inferior aspects of the corporeal nature. So sometimes when we have a simple statement like that, it's far more complex than it seems. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. And of course, the 200,000 represents the body, the 2 selves, which must unite the body, soul, and spirit. First, they must separate. 2, in order to enter into the great battle. I heard the number of them, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat upon them, having breastplates of fire. I like this, because just imagine, here comes all the great army, and they're all burning up. Well, anyway, this fire, of course, represents purification. So their breastplates are of fire, and also they come, and they're of hyacinth, and fire is purification. And the jacinth stone means judgment. So they're coming forth to purify, and so there will be atonement or a judgment for every wrongdoing. And they had they were governed by him, of course, which were firstborn, because they had what? All of these horsemen have the heads of lions. So that means this represents the firstborn. And out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. And this means the mortification, the purification that takes place. Fire for purification, brimstone for, which is almost like volcanic stones created by volcanic explosion. And when we think of this, I suppose it sounds more frightening than it did when it was in its more mythological or symbolic way. But everyone and every great person has endured this and has passed through it, all of the great wisdoms of antiquity. So there is a strong possibility that both you and I can endure it also. And by these 3, a third part of the men was killed by fire and by smoke and by brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. And in time the soul, which inaugurated the path of diversification because of its descent into matter, is destroyed through purification and desolation. And in that it's only a third part, it's going to be the physical world that is worked on first, the world of the senses. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, and their tails were like unto serpents, and they had heads, and with them they do hurt. And we talked about the same thing in the preceding episode, where we have the sting, which is like the scorpion tail. If we do wrong, we're going to reap the consequences of that wrong. And in no other way can we learn to do things right. When we feel the pain that we do unto others, then we cease to create pain for others, because we know that if we do, we too shall experience pain. It is so arranged under this precise law of cause and effect that as the universe, which is not chaos but orderliness, so perfect is it that whatever we cause another to suffer, we ourselves shall suffer someday. And so the tails are like serpent, but not, it's to hurt so that it's the sting of the cause and effect. And the rest of the men were not killed by these, which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, or fornication, nor of their thefts. Now, part of this, as there has been the descent of the Spirit and the first beginning throes of the purification, as the soul has entered the chrysalis, there is this first part of which is purified, but there's still in the deep recesses of the subconscious, as well as the habits, long habits of the past, governed by family lives and things that we've done that do not succumb to this. And they're just going to continue to bring us trouble until we can dispose of those too. So when it said those that have not yet repented, it's talking about those aspects of us which we have not given up yet, that part of self-will which still remains. Because after all, this is very early in the battle in a way, and the intensity or fullness of the battle has not yet begun and will soon begin as we go on into the bottomless pit. During this period when John wrote his revelation, many who did not follow the one God concept worshipped ritual and religious effigy, which were presented in many, many forms, symbolizing things adverse to the nature of God. Therefore, soliciting powers through one's belief in these false gods was prohibited and considered as sorcery, although the term sorcery was not intended to include those of beneficial powers bestowed upon the soul by the indwelling Christ, such as healing and prophecy. I thought I would bring that up because so many people in religion today believe that prophecy is certainly the work of Satan and part of sorcery, and they also equate astronomy or astrology in with this also. And yet the movement of heavenly bodies is that which governs when we plant our crops. It's regulated our clocks, which give us the hour of the day so that we know how many hours we have left and when night is approaching. All these things are based upon the movement of heavenly bodies. And to throw that part away would be to enter a period of where we had no means by which to tell time. And so, of course, then this opens the doorway upon the angel of the seventh mystery. And for scripture for the seventh mystery, I said, let every soul be subject to the higher powers. For there is no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained by God. And this is Romans 13:1. And this I could not resist, because we have, every power that we have is of God. And however we may use it, be it wrong or right, we are still using his power. The person that writes pornography, it's the power that allows him to move his pen in pornography is the power of God. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying God sanctions pornography, because absolutely that is a direct violation of natural and cosmic law. It brings harm to others, and it's bound by the carnal planes. But what I'm trying to say is that this power, that we have this power in us, and until we have awakened or turned toward the good, we are prone to use that power. And any violation, using it for anything that is going to hurt others, or anything that's going to take us into darkness, like murder and crime and violence and all of this. For all these things, we must reap, that person, or we must reap the effect of this. So, all power is given by God, because God is the consciousness and movement of cosmic order. And so let us be subject to the higher powers, to the world of angels and archangelic, and to the very pure consciousness, cosmic consciousness of God Himself. I wrote that by this time the primary mystery of the apocalypse should be very clear and may even seem somewhat repetitious. However, it must be remembered that there are actually several battles involved, and the Christian mysteries of this period considered the war with Lucifer and the trial. The first, of course, pertained, and we've drawn this on the board too, that great gateway where many are called and few are chosen, in which the person comes to the fight with Lucifer, personal versus impersonal life. And then that second step outside the gateway, which is a series of tests to see if the soul is yet ready to enter into the walk of the Via Dolorosa, or the crucifixion of the soul, by the descent of the spirit to live in the flesh. If they are not ready now, each incarnation, and we must mention this because there is no other way by which there is a fair and equitable means by which God created all people equal and gave all people the opportunity to come unto the resurrection. And so someday, sometime, someplace, every soul will have that opportunity. And should they fail the gateway today, they will not fail the gateway tomorrow, because it is given unto all mankind. As we talked about, that indwelling Christ has never lost a battle. So we open the pages at last to chapter 10. And 10 is a nice number because it usually represents the descent, if it's done the Roman numeral way, like the descent of spirit to live in the flesh and the ascent of spirit to live in the flesh, was considered by the ancient schools of philosophy to be a perfect number. It is unfortunate the battle will not end in chapter 10, but, well, so be it. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, cloaked with a cloud and a rainbow upon his head, and his face were, as it were, the sun, and his feet were pillars of fire. Of course, we know who that is. That is the indwelling Christ who has come down, whose mysteries are cloaked by a cloud, because cloud represents obscurity or inability to see through. And the rainbow is the full spectrum of light, because that is how it would radiate if his face were as the sun, which it is, and his feet a pillar of fire. He comes forth to purify, raise the mighty weapon, and I promise soon we'll enter Armageddon. Be with me next week. I want to thank you for being with us during this exciting journey into St. John's Apocalypse. Jesus once said, "There shall be no peace among people till there be one garden of the brotherhood over earth." So come, let you and I work together for this common cause, that the great age of mankind can come into existence. Until we meet again, peace be with you.